Hello beautiful friends, it's Belinda. I'm here today with my second share for the Cut to You design team for October. Today I'm going to be working with this school books cut file, which is just perfect because I had the realization recently that I've never actually really documented something that has been a huge part of my life for the last 4 or 5 years. I've kind of lost track. So I am at university studying to become an early childhood teacher. It's something that has taken so much of my time, so much of my energy over these last years, and has taken me away from my kids and my family a little bit as well. But it hasn't featured in any of my memory keeping, documenting, storytelling, scrapbooking. So I thought this cut file is the perfect excuse or the perfect inspiration that I needed to remedy that and to tell a little bit about the story about this huge part of my life. So I've gone back and I found this photo, which I think is from maybe 2018, I think, and it's just a photo of me sitting at my desk here working on an assignment. And as I said, this is the school books cut file, which is a new release for October from Cut to You. And I have chosen the absolutely gorgeous Cocoa Vanilla Unforgettable collection to work with here. I've just gone and picked a whole bunch of 12 by 12 papers that I thought I might use. And of course this 6 by 8 paper stack, which I think will be perfect for backing that cut file, as well as a little bit of layering. So that is it. Let's hop on fast forward and see this one come together. Okay, so I'm starting by showing you here how I have backed that cut file using some papers from the 6 by 8 paper stack. And I chose to use a scripted patterned paper for the inside pages of what would have been the book. I just thought that was a really nice way to emphasize that the book part of the cut file. And just as you're watching me trim down this wood grain to mat my background, I will just quickly talk about, in my intro you would have heard me mention that this was a project that I created for the Cut to You design team in October 2020. Obviously we are now in January 2021. At the time that I created this project, I was on a full-time teaching prac, and I'm not sure what happened. Some kind of brain bubble left me without completing or uploading this video to my YouTube and to my social media channels. So you are getting it. It's just a little bit late. I have run some stitching around the border of my white cardstock, and this is a textured cardstock from Basil. It's a really nice striped texture, and when I did the stitching on my sewing machine, I did use a nice bright pink because I'm going to be using this Cocoa Vanilla collection, which includes lots of really beautiful bold pinks, so I wanted to tie that in somehow. And I also knew that I wanted to add a little bit of mixed media to my background. Nothing too bold, nothing that stands out too much, just something quite subtle, just as a way of adding another layer of depth and texture to my page. So I've used the quilted stencil from Kaisercraft along with my Prima really, I think it's called light texture paste. And I'm sorry about the back of my head. I always find it really hard when I'm filming to not get my head in when I need to go right over the top of my layout. Yeah, so I'm using this light texture paste with that quilted one, but I also wanted to add a pop of color as well. So I have this embellishment mousse from Nuvo, which is brand new, hasn't been used yet. And I'm just putting a little bit of that onto my plate, but it's too bright, it's too much, the pink's too dark. I wanted something a little bit softer. So I'm just adding in some of that Prima texture paste, and I think I then come in with, yeah, some of my just really cheap giant tub of modeling paste, which is a much thicker product. And I'm going to mix that in just to soften the pink of the Nuvo embellishment mousse, and it gives me a much lighter, softer pink, which I'm really happy with. And the combination of texture paste that I use actually really worked. It worked really well. The modeling paste that I have in that giant tub, which I've had for forever, it is really quite thick and bold, and on its own depending on the stencil that you're using, it can add too much texture. But by adding just a little bit of that light Prima texture paste at the beginning, it's just made it slightly fluffier, and the finish effect is more what I was looking for. Now this was a stencil that I purchased and I can't remember the brand. I loved the design on it, but I had no idea until I got it out of the box that it's adhesive backed. It was a really thin, almost like a vinyl, and it was adhesive backed. I feel like perhaps it wasn't designed to be used with a texture paste, because once I had put the texture paste over the top of it and then took it over to my laundry to try and clean it off, there was just no way I was getting that texture paste off without destroying the stencil. So unfortunately, after just one use, this particular stencil ended up in the bin because it was no good to me after I'd put the texture paste over it. So that's a lesson learned for me, and hopefully for you if you are in the market for some stencils, is to just pay close attention to the type of material that is used when you are purchasing those stencils. So a lot of that mixed media there does end up getting covered up. I'm just showing you a close-up here of how it's layered, but I'm okay with that. It's enough to just add a little bit more interest and a little bit more dimension. Now what you're seeing me do here, because I realized that that stencil was not going to last for another go and I had a little bit more of the texture paste left over, I put the stencil down onto some scrap white cardstock that I had sitting next to me, and I just filled the whole thing up using that leftover texture paste, and I've just thrown that into my box of little scrap textural elements, and I'll use that in a project somewhere along the way. So now we have come to starting to think about treating my photo or layering behind my photo. So I had cut apart one of the sheets from the 12 by 12 pattern papers, and then I've also just had a quick flick through the 6 by 8 paper stack, and I've picked out, I think I've got about half a dozen, maybe more, different patterns that I think will go well, because I want to do quite a bit of layering behind this photo. And just for another little bit of interest in textural elements, I'm just showing you here how I have run each of those layering pieces through my sewing machine with just some plain white cotton. And now I am using a leftover glassine bag to back my photo, just to add a really nice soft layer behind the photo before I start layering up those really beautiful bold patterned papers behind it. And of course, because the glassine bag, once I trim the ends off, I do need to make sure that those two layers are adhered down to each other. So I just added a little dot of double-sided tape from my tape runner there. Okay, so now it's having pre-cut all of those pieces and pre-stitched them, it's made it really easy for me to just layer everything up behind my photo and play around with it until I find an arrangement that I'm happy with. So when I am creating layers like this, what I'm looking for is to make sure that I've got a nice balance of colors, a nice balance of patterns. So I don't want two similar patterns to be standing or to be up against each other, nor do I want two similar colors to be right next to each other. So I want to make sure that there's balance from top to bottom and from left to right when I'm creating these layers. Now for this one, because I had placed everything exactly where I wanted it, I thought the easiest way to keep these layers in place would be to get out my stapler and just add a couple of staples there. But these smaller pieces, which were 2 3x4s that I cut in half because I didn't need the whole piece, so I saved a little bit there. I'm just trying to figure out what's going to go there. Those smaller pieces I knew I wouldn't be able to staple in that first go. So I'm just going to layer them up here first, and then I will add an extra staple there. Stapling, if this is something that you're not familiar with, stapling your layers together is a really quick and simple way of keeping things nice and neat, particularly when you've spent a lot of time, as I have, as you've just seen, fussing around getting the placement just exactly where you want it. Adding a staple is a really quick and simple way of making sure that things stay where you want them to stay. And now I want to add just a little bit of dimension behind my photo. So I've grabbed a thick piece of packaging card. So I believe this probably came in the middle of a 12 by 12 cardstock pack or something like that. And it's just a thick piece of almost like a chipboard card, and I keep that on hand to use as a mounting piece rather than using foam tape or double-sided foam, or adhesive foam. It's much thinner, so it doesn't add as much dimension, but it does give it just a little lift, just enough to add a little bit of interest without adding too much bulk to my layout. And the irony of this is that while I was concerned about not adding too much bulk behind my photo, once I come to my embellishing, I do go a little bit crazy with the layering and the foam. So it does get fairly bulky in the end. Now I am coming in with my giant roll of foam tape, which I purchased at Bunnings, which is a local hardware store. And I have added a double layer behind the cut file because my photo there is a little bit of dimension there with my photo between the paper layers and that bit of cardboard. Oh no, we're going for a triple layer of foam. So I wanted to make sure that that cut file stood up off the photo, and in order to achieve that I needed to really go to town layering up the foam behind it. So like I said, was concerned about not adding too much bulk to the photo, but then we do end up adding quite a bit of bulkiness with extra foam layers throughout the rest of the layout. And now I'm using my T-square ruler just to make sure that I've got that photo lined up pretty well, and I will come in with some of the Art Institute glitter glue. It dries quite quickly and it definitely dries really firmly, so I'm happy to use that glue, that wet adhesive here. Because I do have the mixed media background, I feel like I need to add the mixed media to grip onto it. I have found in the past that using adhesive tape, it just doesn't stick down as well. And then I just use my little plastic ruler there to figure out where I needed my cut file to sit to make sure that that's fairly centered to my page. I don't think it's perfectly centered, but it's close enough that it's just not noticeable. And now I'm coming in with a title. So I've chosen this foam title from the collection, and it's the word captured, just to indicate that it was a moment captured in my life. And I am adding a little bit of extra wet adhesive behind each of those letters, although these are really quite sticky. I'm just finding more and more now I am tending towards adding a little bit of extra wet adhesive behind behind things like that, because I want to make sure that the longevity is there. I want to make sure that things stay where I place them over time and don't fall apart inside page protectors, which is something that has happened to me in the past. And now we're into the fun part, the embellishing. So I have been through, as you have just seen, the die cut embellishments from the collection, and I've pulled out some of the florals, a couple of these circular frames which I've cut up so that I can get extra use out of them, and just a few different bits and pieces that I think might coordinate well with this page that I'm creating. So I do want to build some really nice layered, interesting clusters here. It was definitely something that I was really feeling at the time that I created this. The layout prior to this also included lots of beautiful layered florals and really a lot of depth in my embellishment clusters, and that's what I've gone for again here. That bright pink camera is just perfect. I absolutely love it. I wish I had about 5 more of them because I could see myself using them on lots of different layouts, but alas, that is the only one. And I'm tacking in some foliage there. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just trying to place things around just to get a feel for where I think they might go, and then once I'm relatively happy with the placement, I'm going to come in with my wet adhesive. And you may notice that most of the time I'm only adding some adhesive to one end of the embellishment, and that's the end that's going to tuck in around the photo or around the photo layers, and I'm either leaving the outside piece just without any adhesive so it doesn't stick flat to the page, or I'm coming in with foam adhesive. And as I mentioned earlier, I really went to town with the depth and all of the foam and popping all the pieces up in these embellishment clusters. And in the end, although it's going to be fairly bulky in my album, I think it just looks so good. It adds so much visual interest, and it's such a simple way of creating a really stunning and impactful layout. So you're going to watch me here finishing off with the embellishment clusters. There's nothing groundbreaking, nothing that I think I really need to point out other than just having you watch me work. But I will take a moment. You may notice that this page has no journaling, and as I said, I wanted to document what was a really important part of my story and my family story over the last few years. Because there was a lot that I wanted to say, I did actually create a separate 6x12 page which just has the journaling on it. So it's a 6x12 piece. I created it to really tie in well with what I've created on this photo page, on this photo layout. And in the close-up photos that I have coming at the end, you will get a little glimpse at that and how that's going to sit side by side in my album. I knew that I had a 6x12 journaling piece similar to this already in my album, so it would fit in really well. And yeah, you will see that coming up in the close-up photos, which will be here in just a moment. So if you are new to my channel, I would love for you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can join me for all of my upcoming videos. If you have been with me for a little while, thank you as always for all the support that you give me, all of your comments, all of your likes, all of your feedback. They really do make me so happy, and they make me feel like what I do is helping to inspire people. So that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.